Hey everyone, welcome back to the workshop. It's been cold up here in Minnesota. We've had some temperatures in the negatives. My shop is insulated and does have some heat, but it did get a little chilly. So I thought I'd come out here and check on my machines, see how they're doing. Everything seems to be okay, and thought, hey, I've had some questions on the Omtech Polar Lite that maybe I could answer, and we'll have a little bit of fun making some projects along the way. So this is just gonna be kind of a fun working through some projects, giving you a few ideas and answering some of those questions. So if you want to hang out with me, find out a little bit more about this laser, see what we do with some of the projects, stay tuned. I'm gonna jump right into it. All right, so one of the questions I get asked is about the pass-through. So if you see down here, we do have a slot where we can pass material through, and there is also on the back side another slot that opens up. So this allows us to open up the laser and work with some longer material, but people are asking how effective is that? So I'm gonna show you just kind of what you can get through there and how it opens up, hopefully answer that question. All right, so step one, we do need to take off this back panel here, and it's just some Phillips head screws holding on this bar. And then that will fall out of place. And there is a fairly thin strip here. Let's see. Got a measuring tape here, and it looks to be no more than 1/4 inch thick, and we are just under 16 wide. So you're really looking at about a 15-inch wide piece of material, no more than 1/4 inch thick, at least through the back slot. All right, so, and then on the inside here, you see we have kind of this bracket that's holding another piece. So these have a, I believe they're 2mm head Allen screws, so we can loosen those up. Then that part will pop free, and then we can slide this back up, I guess, get it out of the way. And that opens up this front section here as well. So if I bring you in close, you can kind of see that does sit flush with the honeycomb panel, and we can see the gap to the back there. There are some screws that stick down underneath the fan unit, so I don't think we'll be able to work with more than 1/8 inch material, but let's see what passes through. All right, have this 24-inch sheet of 3mm Baltic birch, and we can slide it in here. That would allow us to work on this area, and then we can continue to push it through. Feels like it's catching. There we go. Just got to make sure it gets through their level, and so we could move that on through as well. So here you see it did feed in to the laser, and then coming around back, it is sticking out. Now there's no feeder to move it through, so this would be a manual feed through process. So you'd have to be using like print and cut kind of operations if you're doing something the full size of it. But if you wanted to engrave something in the middle of this, where you can't fit it side to side, but it would fit inside there, that would definitely work well. However, looking at this, you can see there's really not a lot more room. It is kind of just almost rubbing on those screws. So it really kind of looks like 1/8 inch material is about it that's gonna work through this pass through. And nothing wider. I mean, really, you're probably gonna be looking at 12-inch wide, but up to about 15 inches would pass side to side, and really, then it's just the limit of how long you can support it and such. So hopefully that helped answer that question. All right, so another one of the questions I've received is how well can this cut 1/4 inch acrylic? So we've done some playing around with acrylic on a variety of lasers, and I have a whole video on tips around working with acrylic. So I'm gonna start dialing it in with some 1/8 inch acrylic, but I do have some 1/4 inch stuff that we will try. So I'm gonna drop this in the laser here. We'll jump over to light burn, and I'll show you just a little bit about dialing in your settings. All right, we're in a light burn. So the first thing we're gonna wanna do is go ahead and come to our camera control tab and update the overlay. That's gonna bring in our piece so we can kind of place our cut test when we get it brought in here. All right, so now laser tools, we want to come to material test, And this is where we're going to set our parameters. Now, when I'm doing a cut test, I do my power at, I'm going to go from about 60 to 100% power of the laser itself. This one is tuned where you can go 100% power. It's not going to overdrive the milliamp rating, but if you want to hold back on it, you could do 50 to 80% and then not be stressing your tube as much. So we will go with that, but then we want to work on our cut speeds. So one thing you can do is come over into, say, Google. You could go into your own app, but come into their AI mode and ask it a question. So what are typical power and speed settings for cutting 1/8 inch clear acrylic on a 50-watt CO2 laser? This will hopefully scour the web, and it is going to give you a ballpark setting. So they are saying for cutting an 1/8 inch clear acrylic on a 50-watt CO2 laser, typical settings range from 10 to 20 millimeters a second for speed and 25 to 80% per power. So you even call out, Omtech Chinese lasers, 9 to 10 millimeters a second at 25 to 8. Epilog, 15%, 100% power. So they're giving you some of the feedback on where they found this information. So use search engines and AI search for kind of getting your ballpark figure. So what we can do is say, okay, if they're saying Omtech Chinese lasers, 9 to 10 millimeters a second at 25 to 80% power, I'm going to come back into Lightburn now. Again, I'm not going to go down as low as 25% power. I'm going to stick with the 50 to 80%, but I might go at, say, 8 to about 13 millimeters a second. We won't need 10 here, so we're going to go 7, and let's jump this down to 7. Use your preview tab to give you an idea here. All right, so I got that right. I don't want the point. Let's drop this down to 6. That gives us kind of even numbers. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 millimeters a second, and 50 up to 80% power in 5% increments. That's a pretty good mark of where we need this to be. So we can now go ahead and run this on our laser and see where our settings end up. All right, so I ran the first test we set up from 8 to 13, and it blew through the whole thing. So then I went from 15 to 20, again at 50 to 80% power, and we got through all the way up to about 19 millimeters a second. This end one is, it might push out. It might just be the backer paper holding it in. Yeah, there we go. So they were pretty close, getting through at up to about 20 millimeters a second for 1/8 inch clear acrylic. So we can base our engraving or our cut off that. The edges are looking actually pretty good. You want low air. The air on here isn't adjustable, but it's not overly powered anyway. So we are getting a pretty clean edge on there, which is what we're looking for, that nice mirrored finish. So overall, looking pretty good at that. I just guessed at the engraving speed on there, and you can see that it was engraving good letters pretty well. That usually is low power, high speed. So I just set it to 20% power, and I believe it was about 400 millimeters a second. Now we can go ahead and jump into 1/4 inch acrylic. And so I went ahead back into our AI and I said, well, how about for 1/4 inch acrylic? And here's its statements. For cutting 1/4 inch, approximately 6 millimeter clear acrylic on a 50 watt CO2 laser, the general rule of thumb is 10 watts per millimeter of thickness. 1/4 inch is at the upper limit of what a 50 watt machine can handle efficiently in a single pass. Speeds will be significantly slower. So that's an interesting fact. I hadn't necessarily heard the rule of thumb about 10 millimeters or 10 watts per millimeter of thickness. So in this case, they'd be looking for more of a 60 watt. Now this is technically a 55 watt CO2 laser. So we should be in that range. And you see down here, they are recommending some slower speeds, 4 to 5 millimeters a second at 45 to 80% power. Now based on this going up there closer to 20, I think we're gonna be able to hit that and we'll see. But I am gonna set up the same job. We're gonna run it at probably, I'm gonna go 4 to 8, 4 to 8 or 4 to 9. I don't like going a whole lot slower than 3 to 4 millimeters a second to really start pushing that risk of fire. So we'll jump back over into here. I've dropped the 1/4 inch material in there, and we're just gonna bring up our material test tool again. And we went from 50 to 80% power. Let's see, we had this down to, I think, what, 7, and then we're gonna go minimum of 4 millimeters a second on up to, now let's do 9. Cut that back, I think there. Let's take a look at our preview, make sure I got everything right. Yep, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the speed and 50 to 80% power. Good to go there. And then here, my text settings, this is where 400 millimeters a second, 20 percent power, and we're on the fill mode. And then just to make sure we hopefully get our border out, I am going to slow this down to 4. We'll go 85% power. I'll change this. All right, we'll change that to 60. We'll change this to 85. There we go. Hopefully that will cut through our border, and we'll have a test to show you in just a minute. All right, so that test cut did complete, and let me just give you a little contrasting background here. So here, get that to focus, and you can kind of see there up at 7 and 8, even 9 millimeters a second, it's getting through. Interestingly enough, at 80% power, it kind of fused back together. So definitely can cut through 1/4 inch acrylic. Now I will caution you, at the slower speeds, it's kind of starting to deform down here. You can kind of see that getting too much power, too much heat, and even this edge where it was along the edge of the acrylic, it was running at 4 millimeters a second and pretty high power. It's just too much. It actually started to cause some flames from the vapors being burned. So I would keep this around 6 millimeters a second and somewhere around 60 to 70% power. That's right in the middle there. Should be able to get through that, have clean edges, but not be burning with too much power or too slow speed to cause some problems. So definitely 1/4 inch acrylic, clear acrylic with this laser working pretty well. And I don't know if you can see that edge, but that edge there looking pretty glass finished. So pretty nice job by this laser on the acrylic for cutting, and the edge and even the engraving there you can see is pretty decent. All right, so another question I'm asked, not with just the Omtech laser, but a lot of lasers are, where do I get my inspiration? Where do I find my files? Well, it's always best to make your own files, and hopefully you can get inspiration from watching my videos, looking at other people's projects, or hopefully your friends and family are probably asking you, hey, can you make this for me? And so it's always great when you can design your own files. However, not all of us have a super creative thumb all the time. Sometimes we get into creative blocks and need a little help. So one of the sites that I have used in the past, due to its kind of economical nature, as well as a general openness to use things commercially, is Creative Fabrica. So let's jump over here, and this is a site that you basically, the best way to do it is through their subscription deal. Works out to be about $4 to $5 a month, and you generally get the ability to use the files in commercial sense, that you can create items with it and sell them. Now, with the caveat is that their license states that they make a best effort to ensure that their stuff is properly sourced, but there may be some things that slide through, and depending on how you use it, you do want to read their licenses carefully to make sure that you are covered for the case you're using. So a lot of that is having an active subscription when you're actually creating the item and such. So, but if you kind of stay away from any of the things that lean more towards, intellectual property infringement, you'll probably be better. And so one thing I like about them is they do have these different features up here, specifically for laser cutting, as well as 3D printing. I don't use it as much for 3D printing, but for laser cutting, it's great to find some files. You can also find just general images and fonts here as well. So if we come into the laser cutting section, of course, right now they're going to be showing us a bunch of Christmas things, but you kind of get a feel for what's out here in these designs. They are generally made up so that you can drop them in, make some modifications, and be ready to go. Most of them are SVG files that will work well in most laser softwares and such. So this is one of the sites I do use to get something done quick, get some inspiration for something, maybe take it and modify it to my liking. So let's just jump over to one I've found that I thought we'd play around with here, and this is a Christmas Gingerman laser cut file. And so here you do see it does say including commercial license. It is good to note some of the creators' notes on here. They're saying you cannot resell this product. Basically, that should be stating that you cannot resell the files itself, but you can use it to create products. So we could make an ornament and customize it and sell that, but you shouldn't be taking these files and reposting them somewhere else. So anyway, you can download this. I've gone ahead and done that, and depending on what it is, you'll see that they have a variety of different files in here. So it came zipped up. I unzipped it. They have Adobe Illustrator, Corel Draw file, DXF for the old school CAD users, EPS, PDF. And then here's what we're looking for, these SVGs. Now, a lot of people get confused when they see Microsoft Edge HTML document. Well, that's because they are defaulted to the Edge browser as their default program, but they are the scale vector graphic items that we want. So what we can do is jump back into Lightburn, and we can drag these in. Now there is layer 1 and 2. I'm going to go ahead and just drag those over here so we can look at them. There's layer 1, and they're calling this other one background. So here we have our vector graphics ready to play with, and looks like they are grouped. So if we want to see how this might look, we can switch this temporarily over to a fill layer on this one. So this would get cut out, but these lines would be cut out, and this would get laid on top there of that one. And what we would do is engrave the smiley face, and you get your little hook thing on the back. So you can definitely play around with that, do a 2-layered thing. And what I'm thinking of is making this back one lighter and then making the top one out of a darker. And I have some true flat material, so we'll jump over and show you this real quick. Here I have a couple different scraps of true flat material. We've got our walnut veneer and we have their oak. So I'm going to cut the Gingerman out to size, probably big enough that it fits vertically on here. We'll just keep that grain going the right way, and then we'll cut the outline out on this, and then we will have we'll use up some of our scraps, and we'll have a cool little ornament to boot. So let me go ahead and get these pieces into Lightburn. We'll get them set up. We'll take a look at it at the end. All right, so jumping into Lightburn, we're going to get the items positioned onto our 2 different types of material. I'm going to go ahead and set the face to an engrave. We're going to be going with 250 millimeters a second and about 65% power. And then we're going to set our cut to 13 millimeters a second. Again, 65% power. We don't want to overburn this true flat material. I'm going to go ahead and send that through the laser. The engraving's giving us a nice dark contrast. Their cutting is working pretty well, getting a little bit of flashing from that finish on the surface of the material, but we're going to go ahead and be able to clean that up just using a shop towel here along with some LA Awesome. You kind of see the material getting lifted up there. That's one thing I really like about True Flat. Just to spice this up, we're going to go ahead and use some red acrylic here. We're going to cut out a little M that we'll be able to glue onto the piece as well. I'm going to use just a little bit of CA glue here. And I'm going to put some just along the back. You don't need a lot. You don't want a bunch of squeeze out. So I'm just going to be adding a thin line here. I'm using a thick variety. Depending on the brand, thick or medium will work fine. Thin is more of for like wicking into materials, and not so much of laying down a bead and then pressing them together. So just be mindful. I like Starbond and or a company called Bob Smith Industries. They make fairly consistent CA glues between the two of them. And got links down below if you're looking for a good CA glue. But so a little bit goes a long way with this. This isn't structural or anything. It's just an ornament. Just need these parts to stick together, and then just really carefully place it down. You don't want to move it around too much, smearing that glue around too much. You can use accelerator if you have a tricky spot, but that tends to sometimes create some fogging, and I don't like that. So a little bit of patience here. Really, some white glue would be best because you could clean it up if you have some squeeze out. There's just a little bit. If you get really close in there, you might be able to see a little bit of squeeze out on there. And here, again, we don't want to move it around. We want to kind of get our placement right away. So just hover over it, and then once you're happy with its placement, drop it down, press it down a little bit just so that it grabs onto that acrylic, or the acrylic grabs onto the true flat plywood. And we'll leave it there for just a minute or two to cure. And here is the completed gingerbread ornament. Took just a few minutes to find it on Creative Fabrica. Used some scraps of true flat plywood and a little bit of acrylic cutout, and a fun little personalized ornament. So hopefully that can help you out when looking for places to get inspired, or even to find files for your use and your needs, whether it's for hobby or for business. Like I said, just be careful to read the commercial use statements and licenses on there. Make sure that everything you're doing falls in there, and how you are going to use it falls within the acceptable use of that license as well. Overall, my thoughts on this after a few months, I still think it's a really nice kind of budget desktop laser. There is, some limitations in the workspace and the pass-through and such, but if you're working with primarily 1/8 inch material or some 1/4 inch material, this is going to work pretty well for you. If you're wanting to get into acrylics, it works great for that as well. Doesn't take up a lot of space. It's not as unwieldy to move around, get into place. If you have maybe an indoor, a basement, workshop, things like that, this is going to be a lot easier to get into your workspace. One of my concerns that I listed in my initial review was the row back fans. Now, they do a good job of exhausting the smoke and vapors, but they do seem like they could be kind of hard to maintain. So what I have done is I have my shop vac with a small nozzle on it. I just kind of keep with the laser off. I keep the fan from spinning with just kind of using a screwdriver or a wrench in there, and then I will dust it out. And I try to keep up with that pretty regularly. After a few hours of dusty use, I'll try to keep that dust down. The sooner you get it off, the less caked it's going to be. And that seems to be working pretty well to solve that solution. Now, if I've had to, I do feel like I could remove that panel. There are about 4 screws on top and 4 screws on bottom. You are going to need a smaller tool to get at those ones on bottom and get that out. But if I ever do need to surface it, I do feel it's going to be possible. It's just not something that I'm going to want to have to do too often. So keeping up on that maintenance is going to be critical. The other thing that I haven't quite gotten around to yet is testing rotary. Now, I know they have a roller rotary that plugs into this, but they do have the port in the back. It's a 4-pin aviation plug. And I'm thinking I might be able to adapt some of my other rotaries to that. So I hope to test that out in the future, see what we can get working with this one, and see how well it does work as a rotary device, because I know that is something that a lot of people want as well, is some consistency in their files and their settings for working with the powder coating on a lot of stainless steel tumblers. Diodes, it can be all over the place with the colors. A CO2, it's going to be a little more consistent based on the actual thickness of the powder coating. So I'm hoping to test that out in the near future. But if you have other questions or comments about this laser or the projects and materials used in the shop, go ahead and leave those down below. I will try to answer them, or once again, do a follow-up video like this to help answer a few questions that I get in over time from this laser or out of the other machines I use in the workshop. If you are curious about this laser, I'll have a link down below as well, and as well as any coupon deals I can throw your way. So if this did help inspire you to get this laser, always appreciate you using that link. Tells the company that you appreciated my info. gives a small kickback to me. But as always, I'm most important wanting to give you some good information to help you make more educated decision on your purchases for your workshop as well. So thanks for watching this. If you liked it, hit that like button, throw a comment down there, tell me what you thought. And if you're new here, hey, consider subscribing. I try to do a lot of tutorials and reviews, and also do a live stream every Sunday night with my friend David over the Clack Shack, just to have a lot of interaction back and forth with you. My primary goal with this channel, as I said, is to help educate and inspire you. So I hope I did that, but I hope you get out in your workshop and make something too. We'll catch you next time.